Bon, je vous souhaite la bienvenue.
Welcome to the third meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. I would like to remind participants of a few points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before taking the floor.
Je suspends une minute.
I'll suspend for a moment. I'm going to start the meeting again. I beg your pardon, we had some technical difficulties. Before I welcome our witnesses, I just have a few words to say. I would like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed to the chair. And I would ask members to raise your hand if you wish to speak. Whether you are attending in person or via Zoom, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain the speaking order.
Conformément à l'article.
So pursuant to Standing Order 1083F and the motion adopted by the committee on September 25th, 2025, we are meeting today to study the issue of renewing the employment contract for parliamentary interpreters. I would now like to welcome our witnesses from the International Association of Conference Interpreters, the Canada chapter, Alianka Skup, President. Did I correctly pronounce your name? Yes, and Nicole Gagnon, Conference Interpreter and Spokesperson. You have 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement. We will then move on to a question and answer period with committee members. Ms. Skup, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Good day, Mr. Chair and committee members. Your decision to assess how new procurement rules will impact the availability and quality of interpretation services in Parliament and other high-level events is both important and timely. As interpreters who have personally worked in Parliament for many years, we can address the question of how service quality will be affected by the new procurement requirements PSPC is about to put in place. PSPC has shared with accredited official languages interpreters, who are potential bidders, their proposals for sweeping changes to the relationship between Canada and individual freelancers. In turn, we have warned PSPC that their proposals would challenge the quality of interpretation services in Parliament. Today, our message is that you should be concerned about being understood when speaking your language of choice in Parliament if these proposals were to become requirements. Next week, AIC Canada will release survey research that will make it clear that PSPC's proposals are likely to cause a critical mass of freelancers to refrain from bidding for Parliament work. This will make the shortage of accredited freelancers in Parliament even more acute, further constraining your work and the quality of interpretation services available to you. Among other things, PSPC is proposing to introduce a lowest price system for assigning work. They call this best value procurement. It would replace all the measures in the current rules designed to ensure quality. This is an antiquated approach other governments have long ago abandoned because it squeezes quality from the services being purchased. As Cal Harrison, who is a procurement expert, wrote in the Globe and Mail as far back as July 22nd, 2016, it has been well documented internationally that price-based procurement wastes public money, both in the inefficiency of the process and in the low quality of solutions that bidders are forced to offer and implement. What PSPC is proposing will force freelance interpreters to cut corners. It will eliminate the most experienced interpreters whose knowledge about the high-pressure and highly technical nature of interpreting parliamentary events will likely be lost. PSPC suggests quality will be maintained because all freelancers will continue to be accredited by the Translation Bureau. Yet, like other professionals, all interpreters are not equal and do not possess the same knowledge and experience. Would you accept a newly licensed pilot as the captain of a 747 aircraft filled with hundreds of passengers? Would you hire a criminal lawyer to litigate a copyright matter? Of course not. The same realities apply to freelancers. Each of us offer different areas of expertise, experience, and qualifications outside the realm of interpretation that will not be considered whatsoever under PSPC's lowest price system. PSPC will probably tell you in a moment that something must be done to control the cost of freelance interpreters, whose rates have apparently climbed by 70% since 2018, as per Amendment Number 3 published on July 30th, 2025. In fact, in 2023, PSPC accepted bids for the current procurement system that could be up to 70% higher than the median or midpoint of all bids. In all the previous iterations of the contracts were only awarded to those suppliers whose bids fell within more or less 20% of the median. If tighter limits on the definition of acceptable bid were put in place in the upcoming rules, there would be no need to include proposed lowest price requirements in the assignment of parliamentary work. PSPC has also proposed hourly rates paid only when interpreters are at the mic, in place of the current system of daily rates. A daily rate is the standard for professional interpreters here in Canada, and you have 30 seconds remaining, and in institutions around the world, and for good reason. Interpreters working for Parliament are tethered to the Hill for 13.5 hours each day. They spend considerable time preparing before each assignment. Federal officials suggest building standby and preparation time into freelancers' hourly rates, but freelancers know that doing so would price them out of the work in a lowest price system. I'm sure Minister Lightbound is a very busy man. That said, it is regretful that Minister Lightbound is absent today. The proposals of his ministry will effectively convert the Official Languages Act requirement for equality between French and English in Parliament to a guideline that may be followed or not. Thank you for your invitation to appear, and thank you to our colleagues in the booth today. Thank you, Ms. Scope. We will now move into members' questions. In the first turn, each member will be given 6 minutes, starting with the Liberals.
Bonjour. Alors,
Good day. So first of all, I would like to thank the interpreters who are with us today. and put the emphasis on the role of interpreters in our two official languages here in Canada. And the relevance and quality are very important. I also wish to highlight what you mentioned. Yes, experience and the mastery of subjects in Parliament is also important. That experience is to our benefit. And so, according to that logic, we do need high-quality interpreters. But my question is also, how should we evolve with new technologies? I would like to hear you on that, because it is true. Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, I'm noticing that when we voted on the internal motion, it was the Conservative Party that was meant to receive the first turn in the question round. I will suspend and confer with.
Monsieur Gaudin,
Mr. Godin, you are correct. I conferred with the clerk. I apologize, Ms. Chenette. I made an error. Here's what I propose. We will give the floor to Mr. Godin, pursuant to the motion we passed, and then, Ms. Chenette, we will give you your turn. And, Ms. Chenette, I will allow you to restart from the beginning. Mr. Godin. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is the disadvantage or advantage of sitting on this committee for many years. So thank you to my colleague for presenting our witnesses, and I also thank you. It is a parliamentary right to have access to proceedings in both official languages, and the importance of and interpretation services are of the utmost importance. My question is, what will change in comparison with the existing rules? What you say is that the only eligibility criteria is the lowest offer. Is that correct? In the past, only accredited interpreters were called to submit proposals. But now the rules would allow the lowest bidders. In the past, the interpreter's profile was taken into account. There were 5 criteria, including regarding quality, and the new rules do not include any of this. So only accreditation and the lowest offer are taken into account according to the new rules. Is there a variation for freelance pay? Does it take into account their skills? The minimum to be taken into account is accreditation, but for interpreters, like in Canadian society, we can have different educational backgrounds, different levels of experience, different specializations. All of that is taken into account when someone makes an offer, and that is as it should be. Tell me, above and beyond money, how can we find a solution for parliamentarians to be better served in interpretation? Because I can tell you, as a parliamentarian, we do not always have access to interpretation. So is there a solution to that? We also need to understand that we're in a difficult economic situation, and that will continue. So how can we find a solution to both respect the parliamentary rights of parliamentarians and also be more efficient and effective with parliamentary service in interpretation? The problem is not a matter of money. We are not asking for more money. I understand your concern, But the solution is not to cut interpretation services. You want to increase capacity, and we understand that. And we congratulate the Translation Bureau on its efforts over these past years, finally, to increase investment in university programs to recruit new talent. Since 2022, when AIC carried out a study on the topic, we found that interpreters who are currently working, within 5 years, 50% of them would retire. And 30 interpreters since that time have retired. So new interpreters are more important than ever. You want to increase capacity, and that is normal. And it is possible to do so if we come back to fully in-person meetings. The Parliament of Canada in 2022 decided to hold hybrid meetings. And because of that, serious injuries were caused to interpreters, and many interpreters left the profession for that reason, to protect their hearing. The Translation Bureau, after incidents, adopted a protocol, and thanks to pressure by AIC Canada, the precautionary principle needed to be respected. So safer working conditions. We do work fewer hours, but the preparation time is the same. But exposure time is reduced to reduce our exposure to virtual sound. So if we went back in time to the former conditions, we could work more hours. What you're saying is that interpreters in their jobs are working fewer hours since the pandemic, and that is what was brought on by the pandemic. But there were already virtual committees. There were witnesses testifying before 2022 online. It was the exception, but if we look at all of Parliament Hill, we could increase accessibility to interpreter services by getting rid of virtual work, but I don't think that it is possible to put an end to virtual work. If you could answer in just 15 seconds. You're entirely right. Before hybrid parliament, there were witness testimonies over video conference, but the difference was that they had to go to technicians' studios. So technicians could ensure sound quality and protection of hearing health for interpreters. But now people join meetings from their home, and we have no control over sound quality. Thank you. Ms. Chenette. Thank you very much. Thank you once again for being here and for the work that you do. So I completed my preamble, and now I'll go straight to the question. You mentioned technology, and I think Mr. Godin referred to it as well. We can't go back in time. Technology and artificial intelligence are having an impact on all of our professions. So now we're looking at optimization because, of course, health and safety is important for all individuals. And there are courses we can take to protect people. But in your profession, how do you plan to adapt, to use tools to make your work more optimal? And when it comes to the competition that you are facing, are you concerned in regards to that with the lowest price? Because we need to do as much as we can with the resources that we have. So what is your plan to adapt? Thank you for your question. Through you, Mr. Chair. Artificial intelligence is ubiquitous, we all agree. And AIC Canada is not against progress. An important thing to understand is that artificial intelligence is not a thinking mind. It is a tool that can be useful, yes, it's true, for preparation if interpreters receive the documents in advance, which is the case less and less, I must say. we used to receive documents 48 hours in advance. To come back to AI, generative AI does not understand what it reads whatsoever. It is not a thinking mind, but an algorithm. It has a difficult time interpreting interpersonal dynamics, culture, humor, and emotions. AI is based on databases that 9 times out of 10 use this word for this equivalent. So yes, this technology can be used to help us prepare. However, interpretation with AI in the upper or lower chambers or in the committees is not up to the task for the time being. I think you're right regarding the limits on technology today, but we know it's evolving rapidly. That is why I was curious how you plan to adapt, because now we are seeing algorithms that we can wear directly in our ear. And I'm not saying that this is what we should adopt for interpretation, because you are the professional interpreter and you know better than I the experience required. I was wondering how you might adapt using technologies that can allow you to be more efficient. So I agree that we're not there yet, but it's important to. And how can you help our government to work more optimally? Well, as I told you, we can use these tools to help us better prepare. And I wouldn't rule anything out in the future, but all new technologies have been created by man or by woman, and humans need to remain a part of this process. I know that it is very popular, these in-ear devices that can help you understand all sorts of different languages, but you're still in person, face-to-face. And you can apologize or read the other. But when you're in the booth, you do not have that access. So for the moment, we have to use the technology as much as we can, which would only be for preparation. There certainly need to be improvements to the virtual platforms, which are better than they were, but the quality is not there yet.
1 minute 20 secondes. 1 heure.
1 minute and 20 seconds remaining.
On peut travailler ensemble pour.
We can work on those needs together to improve quality and to protect health and safety and skills and adapting. How can we, inaudible for the interpreter, what can be done by the government to help you? Well, the governments are interpreters use artificial intelligence to prepare their texts. And IT teams are working on their platforms, I would hope, to improve them. You have adopted measures and protocols to follow and to help determine how to use the correct equipment, how to prevent feedback. So everyone is doing what needs to be done to help matters advance. Thank you, Ms. Chenette. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Beaulieu for 6 minutes. Welcome to our guests. We've often heard that in the federal government there are 2 languages, English and the interpretation of English. And you're right to say that this is a whole question of linguistic duality being called into question. If we only use the lowest offer criterion, of course that could lead to decreased quality because less experienced interpreters could be hired. And what you want is the status quo, is that right? How can we ensure the lowest price but protect the quality? At this time, it's not really the status quo. But for interpreter assignments, 5 criteria are used: availability, security, clearance, language proficiency, geographic availability, and quality. And quality is not mentioned in this new version, which was presented to us. We don't know how PSPC is planning on evaluating that. Also, we have interpreters who have been on the Hill for quite some time, who have, for example, completed studies in law or other studies that can be taken into account instead of just choosing the offer that costs the least. And if things were to work that way, the interpreters who have the most experience will simply no longer be present because their rates will be too high, which includes their different studies, their backgrounds, and their experience. So they will be excluded from the interpreter pool. When it comes to these different quality indicators, we should really also do an analysis of the value. So this option proposed by the government, doesn't it reflect that French and interpretation are considered as less and less important by Parliament? There are fewer and fewer members of the House of Commons speaking in French. We recently saw a press conference only in English. So I'm not sure what your opinion is, but I think that this shows a lack of will from the government.
I don't think it's up to us to address matters of politics. On another point, you said that measures to protect interpreters' hearing were being suppressed. With respect to this sound quality, in what way is there a difference here? Are you saying that hearing will be less of a factor under these new conditions? I'll add to, if it's all right with you, I'll add to the comment made by my colleague. It's not only about French, Mr. Beaulieu, it's also that you have francophones on the Hill that are speaking French, but then there's also those of you that want to be understood in English. What was your question again? Oh, about this issue of protection for interpreters' hearing. Let me be clear. I don't want to mislead you. Nothing in the rules says that they would be doing away with all measures taken to protect interpreters' hearing. Those procedures don't appear in the new context, in the new contract. So what's said orally is not the same thing as what's written down in paper. We would like to see things written down in the new contract. So there have been a number of feedback incidents, and there's also a shortage of interpreter. Given that Parliament used Zoom as a platform, were you saying that it's not a platform designed for interpretation, correct? So are there other platforms that could be used, would be accessible? Do you have any studies on that? Zoom is indeed not an interpretation platform. It wasn't designed for that purpose. There are other platforms. I won't recommend one over another, but I know that the studies are being done. The Bureau is actually carrying out some studies internationally. Other jurisdictions use other things. Like in Europe, they use other platforms that are designed for interpretation. MS Teams and Zoom are not designed for interpretation. You have 40 seconds, Mr. Beaulieu. 40 seconds? I read that the agreement, or this new contract, would not consider breaks, or it would focus strictly on your time on the mic. What do you have to say to that? That's correct, Mr. Chair. Last year, we were told they wanted to stop counting breaks. For instance, like the technical problem that occurred at the beginning of this meeting. That problem has been addressed. One of the other proposals that's been made by the Bureau is to have us only be paid for the time on the mic. It's like paying a teacher solely for the time that she's in her classroom, and anything outside of those hours is not considered. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Second round of questions now. I'll start with Mr. Dalton. You have 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the interpreters for their vital service. It's much appreciated because we wouldn't be able to do our work without it. I have a few questions. But to start, for those who are not freelancers, permanent staff versus freelancers, do they work all year long, or do they only work when Parliament is sitting? How does it work? Permanent staffers are represented by their union. The union could answer that question for you, but I could say that yes, permanent staffers receive a yearly salary, and they're available to you year-long when the House is sitting. There are sessional breaks in the summer, but they are there and available all year long. Tell us a little bit about the work that happens outside of your time on the mic. You were mentioning something about preparation. Can you elaborate on that? As a professional interpreter, before a meeting, if we receive speeches or presentations ahead of time, then we go through them, we pull out the terminology, we prepare so as to be ready for the meeting. If sometimes we have to turn to an online search regarding the theme at hand, and depending on the complexity of the subject matter, I'm sure you'll agree that the work that is done in Parliament is quite complex. For interpreters, you can imagine that it requires a number of hours of preparation so as to provide quality services that you deserve, certainly. How have the conditions changed since the COVID times? Would you say that demand is the same for translation, or has there been a rise in demand? There are various aspects to this question. Given the work that's being done in a hybrid setting, there's a cognitive load to working with this hybrid sound. This is sound that goes through the platforms. The sound, of course, is higher, but of poorer quality. It requires a higher level of concentration. Aside from the fact that, unfortunately, when witnesses are not here in person, they sometimes tend to forget to hand in their speeches, so perhaps we receive fewer texts ahead of time to prepare speeches, and all that combined, aside from the fact that some colleagues have to be tending to the platform, being on chats with technicians. All of this has to be done at the same time as interpretation, which increases the cognitive load. So it's more demanding and tougher. With this new proposal, would there be some kind of a grid, or will there be just one option, the lowest bidder? Did they say how this would work? Or is it strictly the lowest bid? You have 35 seconds to answer. The way the contract is designed, those interpreters that fit within a certain range outside of the median are treated in a certain way, but those assignments would be based on the lowest bidder. So for assignments, it would be based on the lowest bidder. You said you would reduce services if the government goes ahead with this plan. Is that a threat? It is not a threat. Freelance interpreters also work on the private market. And so these conditions are not to be found on the private market. There's less of an incentive for us to want to work for Parliament if conditions are better in the private sector. They simply will tend not to offer up their services, these interpreters. Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Mr. Villeneuve, you have 5 minutes. Thank you. Good morning and welcome. Thank you to all the interpreters. French-speaking Canadians in a minority setting, including in Quebec, experience linguistic insecurity in some cases. How can interpretation services counter that? To that, I'd say the best way to counter insecurity is to uphold the will of a nation that seeks to be bilingual. In other words, to have 2 official languages, English and French. And your duty as parliamentarians is to carry out the will of the Canadian people, that is to operate in both official languages. It's not enough to do it in a cursory or symbolic way. Both languages are equal. There's no language above the other. They are on equal footing. And all Canadians should receive quality services, whether that be in English or in French. There shouldn't be a two-tier system. And with all due respect, parliamentarians should be entitled to a higher level of quality than the average person. Thank you. Let's get back to the contract on the table. You said that we would lose out in terms of the quality of service. Is that what I understood earlier?
C'est comme pour tout le reste.
It's like for everything else. The cheapest option ends up costing you a lot. You're going to lose out in terms of quality. If there's no quality consideration here, I mean, there are 4 to 6 pages worth of texts on the issue of quality in the current contract. Now we're looking at a couple of paragraphs of that. Of course, you're going to lose out on the most experienced interpreters that will choose to work for better employers. You will lose out in terms of quality because you have the issue of a new generation of interpreters coming up. I commend the Translation Bureau for seeking out new interpreters, and I can tell you that they need mentorship, these new interpreters, and it is our role as experienced interpreters to offer that service and to do that for our colleagues. We've been doing that forever. If you lose the more experienced interpreters, then you really lose out. It changes everything to have interpreters that have a lot of experience, that are experts in various areas, can serve to mentor the new interpreters on the team. If you think we're all interchangeable, you're gravely mistaken. That's not the case. We have people among our ranks that are former military people, people who have studied biology, people who've studied in a host of areas. You'd lose out on all of this if you decided that Alyonka, who is accredited like everyone else, who is starting out, if you send her to something that she might not be as qualified as someone else. She, of course, will prepare. But let's say if I were assigned to the same assignment as her, then the experience is being brought to bear. We work as a team, and you lose out if you forget about the concerns relating to interpreters' health and safety. We are working on platforms today, so there's a 4-hour limit. If you have people working 6 hours a day, which was the case prior to hybrid parliament, prior to the pandemic, you will lose people, first off. And second, I think you'll also suffer because you won't have quality services, because you can't ask interpreters to work 6 hours in a hybrid setting. It is simply too demanding. The quality of sound is not sufficient. And there again, you'd lose out. I apologize for such a long answer, but I think I needed to give you a fulsome answer there. Mr. Villeneuve, your time is up. Thank you. Mr. Villeneuve, thank you. Mr. Beaulieu, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you. Is there quality control for interpreters today? I think you'll have the opportunity to ask that question of the next panel, that is the Translation Bureau. I can give you a general sense of the issue, which is that there has always been quality control. We have what we call TR4s, the more experienced interpreters. TR4s always assess the quality of their colleagues' work. I can't tell you as to what the future holds, and I'm sure that the Translation Bureau will be happy to answer that question. Okay, I'll hold my questions. Were you consulted prior to the implementation of these changes, this idea of a new contract? Mr. Beaulieu, AIC Canada is a professional association. We are not a union. The relationship, not between the Translation Bureau, but PSPC, that issues the contract, and the individual interpreters. So that's where the contract happens. It's up to each individual interpreter to agree to a contract or not. And there was no consultation with AIC on this matter. There never has been. Generally, it's up to the Government of Canada to say, okay, we need interpreters. These are the conditions. You can either agree to or not. Have you heard any comments regarding the issues you've raised? You have 40 seconds. There was a, quote, industry day. We were given 2 hours to ask our questions. Freelancers asked over 400 questions about the new procurement rules. Some were answered and some were not. Very well. Perhaps a final question. All of these sound incidents, these injuries, does this affect the availability of freelancers and availability of interpreters? You have 10 seconds left. Certainly, those who are injured tend to work less. Those who fear being injured offer up 2 days of availability rather than, say, 4. And if we only increase the number of hours, if you increase the number of hours on hybrid platforms, you'll see a further decline. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Mr. Bélanger, you have 5 minutes.
In your Hill Times column from August 21st, you stated that eliminating the quality index for interpreters would open the door to favoritism and unfair, dangerous procurement practices. Could you elaborate on that for me, please?
Yes. So what we were referring to is that not only the quality index, but the procurement system, if it is closed to just a lowest bid, and we have no other controls of who is obtaining the different assignments, that's where it can get tricky, and also the effect on the quality of the interpretation per se makes it more difficult for government proceedings.
Okay. OK. Vous avez mentionné tantôt que
You mentioned earlier that interpreters who are the most experienced interpreters, would they currently be favored or not? It's not about favoritism. If you look at the Standing Senate Committee on Constitutional Affairs, Legal and Constitutional Affairs, it makes sense to me that you might send an interpreter who is a lawyer or specializes in legal matters. The current system is based on the profile of the best interpreter. So, of course, it makes sense to send the interpreter who is most experienced in law, or perhaps is a resource interpreter that tends to work that particular field. It's not about favoritism. It's not about someone who has 30 years or 10 years of service, but if a person has 10 years of experience and is a qualified lawyer, then it makes sense to send that person to the assignment. Is there a shortage of interpreters today or not? Yes, there's a shortage. There's been a serious shortage of interpreters for a number of years. The Bureau is working hard to bring in new interpreters. They're focusing on this new generation of interpreters, but I think you've somewhat reached the limit of what's available. Last Thursday was a very busy day on the Hill, for instance. The Translation Bureau did not have enough interpreters for all sittings and sent out an SOS to its permanent staff to give them additional hours, overtime hours. It's up to them, and it's up to interpreters to accept that or not. I'm not sure to what extent they did agree to it, because once again, it compromises their health and safety, their hearing. There are reasons why we need these measures in place for hybrid sittings.
À tous les interprètes pigistes.
Did they call all interpreters who are accredited in Ottawa? Did they call on all freelancers who come in for contracts here and there? That is a question you can ask the Translation Bureau. That is all that I know. There was a shortage of interpreters one of the days on the Hill last week.
OK. Et puis les...
Okay. And then contract interpreters. Are they working in Parliament or not? Yes, sir. We work together. We are a mix of teams, staffers, and freelancers. And currently, freelancers cover 50 to 60% of work on the Hill. How would an unexperienced interpreter gain experience if they didn't work with someone experienced? As I said, we do work together. There are new interpreters both on the freelance side and the staffer side. If the team is well comprised and includes someone who understands the committee where they are sent, they are able to mentor the new interpreter on that team. It's by interpreting that one learns to interpret, but it is necessary to have mentoring. You have 10 seconds remaining. Thank you so much. Thank you. Dear colleagues, given the hour, we will not have time for the third round of questions, so we will finish this round. The Liberals have 5 minutes, and we will end our discussions with these witnesses. Thank you. And thank you very much to the witnesses. You are very welcome. Ms. Gagnon, you mentioned interpreters working 6 hours a day, and this being too much in terms of preparation. I was wondering what good working conditions would look like for an interpreter in a hybrid setting. Interpreters do not work 6 hours per day on the Hill currently. They work 4 hours per day in a team of 3 or 3 hours per day in a team of 2. On the Hill, in hybrid mode. But yes, 6 hours does apply for in-person sound. This does not take into account preparation time, only microphone time. The parliamentary interpreter receives the assignment between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. the night before the workday. That is when we usually receive an assignment for 2 committees. Based on what those committees are, they may or may not have received documentation. If they have, they devote as much time as necessary to prepare the following day's committee sitting. And in order to interpret such an assignment, a certain amount of time is needed to prepare. And to protect our hearing, the exposure time was limited. And this is how we provide you with the best quality service. Thank you very much. How many hours per day in preparation and in delivering your services would you ask of parliamentarians to have good working conditions? Preparation time depends on the committee. If we are sent to a committee that we already know rather well, or if we are at the beginning of our career, it's normal to need to prepare for longer because we feel more insecure. There are many different factors, so I would not be able to give you an exact amount, but easily 2 to 3 hours per day. Thank you. Regarding artificial intelligence, can it help you? So if you have more experience as an interpreter, you need less preparation time, I would presume. So if you have less experience, I'm curious if new technologies could help you, could help someone with less experience to reduce the preparation time needed for interpretation. If you're using translation tools on those documents that we receive in advance, that can absolutely be helpful. But once again, the problem is that these are not thinking minds. It will spit out words in English or in French, but you absolutely need human judgment to make sure that those concepts will be properly understood. And we don't always receive documents in advance. If not, we can look at the minutes from the committee's previous deliberations. We can call upon a colleague and ask for a glossary that they might have prepared in the past. So yes, these tools can reduce prep time, but will never eliminate it. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This concludes our first panel. On behalf of the committee, thank you, Ms. Scup and Ms. Gagnon, for being with us today. We will suspend for a few minutes to prepare the next panel. Thank you.
À la réunion numéro 3.
Welcome back to meeting number 3 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. We are now ready to welcome our second panel of witnesses for the Translation Bureau. Welcome to Jean-François Limburner, CEO, Lucie Lévesque, Vice President of Policy and Corporate Services, and Annie Plouffe, Vice President for Services to Parliament and Interpretation. You have 5 minutes for your opening statement, and then we will move on to a question and answer period with committee members. You can share your time or choose one person for the opening remarks. You have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. Thank you for your invitation. I recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. With me are Annie Plouffe, Vice President, Services to Parliament and Interpretation, and Lucie Lévesque, Vice President, Policy and Corporate Services from the Translation Bureau. I would also like to say hello to Karine, Sarah, and Tara, who are interpreting in the booth today. The Translation Bureau of Public Services and Procurement Canada is proud to meet the language needs of the House of Commons. During the last fiscal year, we translated 44 million words for you, which is equal to nearly 150,000 document pages. We also provided you with some 12,000 hours of official languages interpretation, covering all of your regular meetings. At the same time, we continued to support major events like the G7 Summit in June 2025 in Alberta. Our parliamentary interpreter team consists of 60 employees, supported by 70 private sector suppliers. This arrangement enables us to manage peak periods efficiently and to adjust our resources during less busy times. The health and safety of our employees and suppliers, and yourselves here in the room, are a priority for the Translation Bureau. We are currently preparing a study on interpreters' exposure to noise, and we are continuing to raise awareness about the protection of interpreters. And thank you to you, Mr. Chair, for your role in this. Thank you to your collaboration and that of your colleagues. The number of incidents has decreased by 60% in comparison to 2020, and we are maintaining our efforts to improve our protective measures.
Intelligence, in accordance with the AI strategy for federal public service. The National Research Council of Canada has been providing the Translation Bureau with AI tools to support our parliamentary translator. We also recently launched GC Translate, a prototype in 6 federal departments and organizations. This AI tool, which enabled the translation of over 70 million words since we've tested last summer, complement the work of our language professional. We're also investing in the next generation with new interpretation programs at l'Université Laval and UQTR, l'Université du Québec à Trois-Rivières, which attracted 38 new students this year alone. Scholarships are also awarded to the amount of $1,000 to 6 first-year students and $7,000 to 13 new graduates, for a total of $97,000 this year. We are hiring 5 new graduates this fall. Enfin, nous renouvelons notre outil d'approvisionnement.
Finally, we are renewing our procurement tool for private sector interpreters while taking into consideration consultations with the industry, health and safety requirements, and best practices. This process also targets financial accountability, as the costs of professional services have increased, like in many sectors of society. Mr. Chair, honorable members of the committee, I hope that this information will be useful to you in your study. My colleagues and I are available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Limburner.
Thank you, Mr. Limburner. We will now move on to the question period. We'll begin with Mr. Godin for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Limburner, Ms. Plouffe, Ms. Lévesque, for being here and for participating. You know that the objective is to improve services to parliamentarians. You have boasted about your 44 million words. I don't remember how many conferences you interpreted, but I would like to hear about what was lacking. You told us about what went well. Can you now tell us what could be better? If 44,000 words were interpreted, and that might not be the right number, I'm sure they interpret more than that. Can you tell us what was lacking? A perfect system does not exist. So at the Translation Bureau, what would be needed to reach a 100% grade? Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Obviously, it is daily gymnastics practice to provide interpretation to parliamentarians. Some sittings are longer, some shorter. As I mentioned, I arrived in January 2024, right after the pandemic, and capacity at the Translation Bureau was an issue. And we're still doing our gymnastics to this day. So we mentioned regular meetings, but also the Translation Bureau supports the Supreme Court and the Senate and other clients within the federal government. Our priority is always to provide quality service with accredited Translation Bureau interpreters. I'll stop you. My question was clear. What were you not capable of delivering under your translation and interpretation mandate? There were, of course, services that were not offered, groups that did not have the privilege of this service. That is what I'm driving at. Mr. Chair, we're talking about translation, but I understand that what you want to know about is interpretation. For our interpretation services, we work with the clerks at the House and at the Senate. Mr. Chair, excuse me, I want to rein you back in because it seems you don't want to answer my question. Actually, I'll drive at something else. What was the mandate that the department gave you for the new interpreter service contract? What is the specific mandate entrusted to you to renew the contract? Mr. Chair, the Bureau has a number of different vehicles that we use, whether it's for sign language interpreting, Indigenous language interpreting, and so forth. This morning we were talking about a contract renewal. Mr. Chair, I beg your pardon. What I wish to know, you were present for the sitting before, and we are talking about the renewal of a contract by the federal government, and that is what we will be talking about. So PSPC, Public Services and Procurement Canada, gave you a mandate letter. What is that mandate? Because you're in a renewal process, is that correct? Not just a renewal process, Mr. Chair. We are in consultation with the industry. This tool, the contract has not been published yet, and that is a normal step in the market. We are consulting the industry, including our IAC colleagues. This is not... We don't want to have a back and forth. What is your mandate? I'm not asking you for any confidential information. I'm asking you what your mandate is that the federal government entrusted to the Translation Bureau. Is it regarding a regular renewal? You received clear instructions, because what we've heard about is that the lowest offer is the only criteria being considered. Is that true? Can you be clear about the mandate given to you? Mr. Chair, I will answer quickly. The current contract comes to an end in December. So like all good organizations, we already began the renewal process for this procurement tool. That is common practice with our procurement colleagues. We have consulted the industry, not only IAC, but a number of others. And these are usually companies of just one person, but there are also companies who came to discuss with us for 2 hours to discuss their concerns and what they propose moving forward. So what you just confirmed is that you are in the process of consulting. You consulted IAC, is that what you're saying? The IAC representative was here. There were a number of people. My question was clear. Did you consult IAC? No more than any of the others? What do you mean by that, no more than? Did you consult them or not? So there was an industry day which was open to everyone interested to ask their questions. Mr. Chair, I would like for the witness to answer my questions. I would like to know, you are in a consultation process. You're renewing in December. That's what you just confirmed. So you're in a process. I asked you 2 questions. They were easy. Is it a normal process like other renewals in the past? And you confirmed that you consulted industry professionals, including IAC. Did you consult IAC? And secondly, I will repeat myself. Is that part of a normal process? Has nothing changed? Did you receive any more specific instructions? Mr. Chair, quickly, this is a normal process. You also mentioned what changed and the lowest offer. And I'll be able to answer that in a future question, but that is not the case. Thank you, Mr. Godin. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will now turn the floor over to Mr. Deschênes-Thériault for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation and for participating at our committee today. So we have been discussing the renewal of interpreters' contracts today. We know that French and English are our two official languages, and pursuant to the Official Languages Act, one or other of the languages can be used in our work, and therefore we have access to quality interpretation services, and there needs to be a sufficient capacity to meet the need. We also know that today's reality is evolving with regards to technology, and those changes will continue in the coming years. A hybrid parliament is here to stay. There will be no going backward. So the need to have rigorous management of public funds is important. We must optimize the way we use our resources. So in your opinion, how can we protect and promote the profession of interpreter while at the same time taking into account the different imperatives that I just mentioned? Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. Obviously, capacity is at the core of our concerns. We have worked together with the panel before us and with 2 universities to add interpretation programs. So when it comes to recruitment, we are very active. Now, when it comes to drawing people towards interpretation, we are trying to attract people who would like to be either a translator or an interpreter. So we're working closely with universities to develop modern courses. Yes, technology is evolving rapidly. So just to give you some context, I would assess that when it comes to interpretation, we're about 2 years behind text written translation. Technology is evolving there very quickly, and Translation Bureau is part of that change. Over the holiday, you have probably used different tools. We were talking about in-ear devices earlier. There are certain tools that are not used. I could ask Ms. Lévesque, who went to visit European Parliament. There is no case where artificial intelligence today can support services like we have here today. So that is currently the case. Things might change. The quality of technology is swiftly increasing. Earlier, we talked about interpreters who are able to come on site here. So that is the first criterion required. We also require people who have the Bureau's accreditation, and the pool has not significantly increased. We have held several exams, and the last exam had a 0% pass rate. It is the most rigorous interpretation exam. So, of course, we are continuing to work on this. In the coming years, we hope to have new employees who will join us, not just freelancers. So the colleagues explained this very well before me. Interpreters often have other opportunities. We can't presume that they will systematically answer our offers. I'll stop there and perhaps take another question. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask you about something a bit different. You know that during the last Parliament, the Official Languages Act was modernized and passed. It was a very long-standing project. And this applies to federal institutions. And the new obligations say that there must be real equality between both official languages. So can I hear you talk about these obligations for the federal institutions? Has this led to new needs for translation and interpretation services? And do you have the necessary resources to meet the needs flowing from those new Official Languages Act obligations? Thank you very much. The Translation Bureau has other clients other than Parliament that are optional that can call on our services. We offer traditional translation at the Translation Bureau. There is new written material being generated every day, and the demand is very high. Some documents are extremely important, and the Bureau continues to process those. But we have been doing less and less work for other federal departments and agencies. However, in Parliament, you are churning out more and more work. That is why we have a translation team fully devoted to Parliament. And yes, they do use translation tools. When it comes to interpretation, I'd like to add sign language interpretation. There has been an increased demand, whether it be for Indigenous languages, foreign languages, or Canadian official languages, but there's also been an increase in demand for sign languages. The population is more diverse, and private sector demand has also increased. We concentrate mainly on providing service to Parliament, but when possible, we also serve other departments, but that is on an optional basis. Now, to answer your question regarding official languages, we regularly meet with the Commissioner of Official Languages, and equal status is essential to us. We are looking at tools that can actually have a negative impact. Sometimes people put trust in tools, and these tools can be used for written translation and spoken interpretation. Recruitment is extremely important. That is one of our 3 main priorities at the Bureau. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Mr. Beaulieu for 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. From what I gathered, freelancers make up 60% of your pool of interpreters here in Parliament, correct? That's an excellent question. I should have been clearer. The Bureau has about 60 employees, staffers from the public service that work for the Translation Bureau. You see the people that are in the booth today, they're from the Translation Bureau. When I say that there's a pool of 70 freelancers, that could be for one meeting in the entire year, perhaps. We generally offer services through our employees. We're trying to correct the situation, but we do intend to work with freelancers. They're part of the solution. The freelancers that you see, many of them are former Translation Bureau interpreters. These are the people that watch you, hear you, and interpret your words simultaneously. Freelancers do not represent 70% of the total pool. We want to correct the situation, but when you look at meetings like the G7, then we need to hire people from elsewhere to meet the needs. Thank you. A contract that focuses on the lowest price now, is that something that will mean you'll be able to hire interpreters who have no experience, have no idea about the parliamentary context, whereas more experienced interpreters may be set aside because they're not the lowest bidders? Does the Translation Bureau think parliamentarians would be as well served regardless of who the interpreter is? The procurement tool that was discussed this morning is not the only tool we use. It's based on our needs. That's the first thing. The notion that it's only for the lowest bidder, Mr. Chair, I beg to differ. We need interpreters that have been certified by the Translation Bureau. That's a guarantee of quality. And so not everyone who bids will be granted a contract. Then we need interpreters in different scenarios, like, for instance, people who have security clearance. We are managers at the end of the day, and we feel pressure like everyone else in society. So we look at the price of things, and in the past, there have been different ways of looking at expertise and recognizing that. And when you analyze the work, I can certainly defer to my colleague, Madame Plouffe, but we assign. It is a puzzle to assign people to the right number of meetings. We know our people, we know our resources, and we assign people to assignments. It's not fair to say that it's only the lowest bidder. It's a small group. We know them. These people could be assigned to some committees, not others, and some will be starting in a new committee. But that's not the only factor we consider when we call upon the services of a freelancer. According to you, the new contract does not favor the lowest bidder? Well, the link that you're making is that the lowest bidder is the lowest quality of interpretation. We were talking about quality assurance. You're part of it if you have complaints about interpreters, and I urge you to do that if required. We take these complaints seriously. We engage in improvement exercises, and our team as a whole looks at the work that we do, and this is how we can assure quality. There haven't been many complaints. We had an excellent G7 meeting. Is that an easy thing to do? Given limited numbers of interpreters, it's not easy to do, but we are currently working, and we're still actually analyzing feedback from organizations like AIC. There are more than 18 organizations that manage freelancers throughout the country. Question, when you select interpreters for an external event, do you factor in their knowledge, their experience? Certainly, we design teams where you pair permanent staffers with others. You know, Annie did excellent work at the G7. It was difficult work. Annie can maybe tell you a little bit more about how she assigns interpreters on a daily basis to support parliamentarians. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to answer this question. On a daily basis, the way we do things, and I will address the issue of quality, we have a pool of staffers. That's 60%, to be clear, of hours of interpretation that is provided by our staffers. These people have expertise. In each committee, we have resource interpreters assigned to each committee, and then, of course, they ensure consistency. They work with freelancers. So we start with our permanent staffers, and then we look at freelancers who have offer a level of quality. We look at their security clearance, and if they're in the region, if you look at quality as a factor, all freelancers meet that goal, and that's an assessment that's done by our internal staff. The freelancers are assessed in the same way? Yes. All freelancers who work for us or have a contract with us, our own employees have their own assessments. They start with accreditation. When there are concerns, then we look into things. Since we've had the quality index in place, we've revoked 2 accreditations. So we are following the issue closely, and there's excellent cooperation. What gives us this guarantee of excellence is the accreditation. In the future, is it possible that you might hire interpreters who don't have a level of accreditation? A very quick answer, says the chair. Answer inaudible to the interpreter. Question inaudible. Answer. In some cases, like for the G7, I did not have interpreters that could support the G7 speaking 4 languages, but these people were accredited by the United Nations, have already interpreted for the G7, the G20, so it can happen in some cases. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Will. Mr. Bélanger, you have 5 minutes. Good day. I'm trying to understand the former process and the process that is being put forward now. Is the only difference that the lowest bidder wins out and gets the contract? If the bidders meet the conditions, which are not strictly price, do you have accreditation? Are you in the regions? Do you, in the right region, do you have your security clearance? Then you have a list of bidders, and that's why the process is underway. Generally, and that's what we mentioned, the previous panel said there was an increase in prices by 70%. This is what we experienced at the Translation Bureau since the start of the pandemic, because you have a limited group and they all have their own rates. We tend to use them all when we really need them. I'd ask Madame Lévesque to tell you a bit more about the process. We also assess providers, and I want to be clear, it's the same for all professional services. We have to assess performance and also the criteria established by the department. Lucie. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you look at the tool today, we discussed criteria. That's availability, the language profile, security clearance. Those criteria will remain in the next tool. As for the quality index, that may not necessarily be a criterion, but it will be measured in the next tool. It will be done slightly differently. So for non-performance or a violation of a code of conduct, all of these things will be considered under the new tool. All things considered, you look at the qualifications, security, and other factors, we will look to find the person who provides the best value. Okay. When there's a request for interpretation, why can't you just say, this is what it's worth and this is what we'll pay? Does it not work? Not in the current market. We provide availability. I heard you earlier on, there was something about a poll. We can't guarantee that a private enterprise, I point out, Mr. Chair, that there are single ownerships, but there are also firms, interpretation firms, that may be interested in bidding. This is not something that we're engaged in right now. Is it the Bureau's intention to increase Bureau employees? That's an excellent question, Mr. Chair. That's the daily challenge and yearly challenge. I know the Bureau is not the only one in this position, but when you look at a situation like prorogation that happened earlier this year in 2025, we were able to provide services based on the needs because Parliament continued to operate mostly through our own staffers. But as soon as you have the G7 that happens every 5, 6, or 7 years, then you have to hire outside of the staffing pool. There have been other commissions that have been held. We have to deal with the private sector. I think it's fair and it's healthy to manage your capacity by dealing with fluctuating demand, and that's what we do at the Bureau. Okay, a question on AI. In my view, right now, I can't see how interpretation could be good in all situations. How quickly do you think that will be integrated within the system? You have about 45 seconds. There's the issue of security. That's one thing in terms of what is conveyed, the humor, tone of voice, and all the rest. Whether that's at the UN, at the European Parliament, or elsewhere in Switzerland, you're looking at conference interpreters. Is there progress? Yes, I go to many conferences where you see that there's progress. We are looking at this conversation closely with our colleagues from the House because subtitles are moving fast as well, improving. Some people prefer to read. So this is a file we're closely monitoring in the advances of AI. We want to make sure that we're respecting Canadian English, Canadian French based on the work of the Translation Bureau. That's all your time, Mr. Bélanger. Madame Minghirelli, you have 5 minutes. Thank you. I'll continue in the same vein as Mr. Bélanger. In your presentation, you mentioned GC translation as a tool that can improve translation federally. To start, I have 2 questions. What departments have access to this tool? And second, does the public as a whole have access to it, or will it soon? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Excellent question. To start, Translation Bureau uses AI and has been using it for decades. The weather forecast has been translated for 20 years. Since 2017, our language experts have been using AI for their work in Parliament. Many people are asking for service, but it's not at any price. We've worked at a prototype that we have trained on the data produced by the Translation Bureau. We don't just have Hansard. We also have work that we've done at the Translation Bureau. We've trained the tool, and our language professionals have said that the quality was preferable to the tools. Maybe this is something you all do. You know, you go to Google and you do Google Translate. Now, translators who can use our tool know that it is safe, that it is based on Canadian language, that is easy to access. It's rather easy to access it. Now, with respect to departments, I think Privy Council, the Department of Finance, Canadian Heritage, the RCMP, and FINTRAC is the other one as well. These are the first departments that we've been sharing these tools with. We've tried it within PSPC. And in the span of those 4 months that we were able to translate over 70,000 words through our tool, the Translation Bureau continues to receive requests from mission-critical services, that is, essential documents that require a language professional's expertise. I hope I've answered your question, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And does the public have access to it? I'm the CEO of the Translation Bureau. We were talking about Francophone minorities outside of Quebec and Anglophone minorities in Quebec. We use a language portal at the Bureau for Canadian languages. These are some of the most highly used tools in the Government of Canada. These are tools for writing and language. There's a tool that's called Termium. This is a tool that is known the world over. Often when I travel abroad, I'm told people are using Termium. It's used as a dictionary. Could it be useful to have a tool that for Canadians? Actually, I don't think it's unrealistic to think of a case where we could offer that type of service. Right now, we're trying to serve the 350,000 public servants and the various departments and agencies. You need high level of language skills. There's no other country that has the data of the Translation Bureau at a high level in French and in English. I would like to take part in an effort to make it available to Canadians in the future. Perfect. Thank you. Done? Thank you. Ms. Minghirelli. Mr. Beaulieu, you have 2.5 minutes.
Question tantôt, est-ce que ce serait possible?
Just as a compliment to my earlier question, would it be possible, is it possible to use unaccredited interpreters for departmental services? Mr. Chair, that's a good question. There was talk, at least the previous witnesses were saying that there weren't enough interpreters for one day. As soon as you're lacking interpreters for a given meeting, you have to reallocate, reassign interpreters. Sometimes departments ask for our services. We can't always offer our interpreters the best that there are. Often there are great firms that don't have the same criteria as the Translation Bureau in offering services. If you have a staff meeting that doesn't require a high level of security, there are tools that are available or firms that are available for that level of expertise you're requiring. Madame Lévesque? Mr. Chair, not so much on the issue of security, but I would like to point out that the services we offer to departments are optional. If you're interested and go take a look at Canada Buys, you'll notice that there are calls for tender for interpretation services that are issued directly by other departments. So some departments call on interpretation services that are available and they issue their own contracts. That's not up to you then? You have nothing to say about quality or anything else? It can happen, Mr. Chair. We'd be consulted. There are other forms of interpretation. There's community interpretation, for instance, in the passport offices and elsewhere where you need other types of interpretation. That's not what we provide at the Bureau, but we have expertise and we can guide them. Sign language also. Increase in demand is affecting everything. Of course, we do that here internally, but we can't support all departments. Do you do regular assessments of quality of these interpreters in Parliament? Very quickly. Yes, that's provided for. As we were saying earlier, chief interpreters look at the issue of quality. They often work with freelancers and take note of any concerns. If there are any complaints or concerns, they'd be addressed. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. I'm going to have to cut you off. Mr. Gill, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read a report that said interpreters' pay will be moved away from a daily rate and replaced with the hourly rate. Why is the government moving from a daily rate to the hourly pay for interpreters?
So maybe I'll start, Mr. President, to discuss again. As we mentioned, we've consulted the industry. That's a standard practice when we establish procurement. And around the world, there's best practices, and we saw both areas that are looking hourly rate, others that they're looking at daily. But I will just say that it's too early because we just consulted the industry. We took their feedback, and we definitely want to find a solution that's going to continue to provide our services. So we've heard that in other things like we've heard, and that's part of the feedback process. And that's some would prefer an hourly rate. Some would prefer a daily rate. At the end of the day, we're going to try to find what's acceptable. But just to go back to best practices around the world, like I spoke sign languages, for example, there's a lot of services and interpretation that are hourly rates. If you call someone, there's services that you can get access to an interpreter for an hour to order something online. They will charge you by the minute, by the hour. It depends on the use case.
Okay. Earlier this year, Air Canada flight attendants went on strike because they were being paid by the hour and were not fairly compensated for the other tasks that their job requires. Is there a way to know whether our interpreters and translators could end up in a similar situation where they are expected to take on a professional workload without fair pay for all the preparation, practice, and research that goes into it?
Okay, if I understand well, Mr. President, last year, everybody heard, it was in the paper, that there was some interpreter were not happy that we were trying to identify the time. Today, you've heard that initially, before the pandemic, they were mainly working 6 hours a day in cabin. When the sound became, but we were not as good as we are now. We've been working with the House of Commons. The systems are all better. We have people on Zoom. Go back 5 years, none of that existed. So we put all kind of measure, including testing. And at that time, it was an attempt for us to try to make sure that all the tests are done. That's been removed from the contract at that time, and that's not something that we live. In terms of the daily rate or the increase of cost of 70% that we spoke about, you've also heard that in some case we're down to 4 hours or 3 hours. So we're very conscious of that aspect, and we want to make sure also that this health and safety remains our top priority. Any-tu ajouter sur les tests qu'on peut faire?
Yes, I can add on the test, you mean? So right now, the way that the contract is set is that there is a provision for about an hour of non-interpreting time, which includes test downs, breaks, as we've done, or pauses for different reasons. 4 hours of, let's say, active interpretation time or at the mic. And there's a provision for some dépassement, so if we go over the time. Now, when we go over by 21 minutes, we're looking at a daily fee. If we go over by 46 minutes, we're looking at double the daily fee of the interpreter. So we're looking at that. So this is the cost that it might. In terms of fair pay, I would say that the pay is fair in that respect, and we're taking into consideration also their preparation. It's how they submit their price. And that's all taken into account into their daily rate. But the active interpretation is about 4 hours. Actually, they're paid for the equivalent of 4 hours, irrespective of the number of hours that they do. So if they do 1 hour or 4, they're paid the same rate.
Mr. Gill, you have about 55 seconds.
I read a report that mentioned a quality index is being used to measure interpreter performance. Can any one of you explain how interpreters are evaluated and how their performance is measured?
But maybe we can the evaluation of the quality of the interpreters.
Just, je mets en pause est-ce qu'on peut mettre en pause le temps?
Could we just pause the time? Are you hearing something? And you do have interpretation? Just a moment. I don't have any sound. seconds remaining. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I'll hand it over to Ms. Plouffe. I'm sorry to take a few more seconds. Could you ask your question again?
Mr. President, sorry.
You want to repeat your question, Mr. Gill?
I read a report that mentioned a quality index being used to measure interpreter performance. Can anyone of you explain how interpreters are evaluated and how their performance is measured?
So I need an answer in about 15 seconds. So maybe there'll be other time to answer at other points.
I'll be quick. So our senior interpreters are responsible for the program of how they evaluate. They evaluate accuracy, the way that they are translating the message, and they are looking at the fidelity with what's being said. They look at the pace also. So there's different index. I'm not myself an interpreter, but we could provide more information on what they are looking at. And it's the same as similar criteria as when we're giving the accreditation process.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Mr. Gill, I want you to know I gave a little bit of extra time given the interruption and the disruption that caused, so I wanted you to know that. Je passe maintenant la parole à Monsieur Villeneuve pour 5 minutes.
Monsieur Villeneuve, you have 5 minutes. Thank you to the three of you for being here. So we're discussing the renewal of a contract, of renegotiating it. I have a two-pronged question. I would really like to know what the tools are that you would need to carry out this work. Are there any new tools that you need? Do you anticipate needing any new tools? And I would like to come back to technology because it's a very common topic. It's evolving swiftly. So for you at the Translation Bureau, how do you try and be one step ahead of the game? And how is that going to shape your work in the coming years? Good question, Mr. Chair. I'll start with the last question. So how can we anticipate this? Things are moving very quickly. The Bureau has an important role in Quebec, and we have consultation tables, not only with interpreters, but also with translators, terminologists, and all stakeholders in the linguistic domain in Canada. And oftentimes we hear the same messages, warnings regarding the value and ethics of these tools, and of course, security as well. Over the past months, we've seen sovereignty, and these tools have become an issue, not only for us, but also for high-profile users. We are on top of cutting-edge technology. We all discuss these tools with our colleagues and in our personal lives in terms of what we use on our phones and in-ear pieces. We need to provide a service for the Government of Canada that is accessible and secure. So we need to react quickly. I work closely with my Senate and House colleagues to have the best advice, the best tools. So now I'm answering the question on technology, Mr. Chair. The safety rules that you use here make it so that we have to respect ISO standards. These are rules that we have in place. And for protecting interpreters, we use those rules, and there are also tools that will help them to prepare, but also to manage the meeting. In the world of interpreting, distance interpreting is on the rise, and that comes along with all sorts of things. I have participated in classes where some people are in the room and some people are virtually. Some interpreters have told me they prefer having their own office rather than being in a booth and being able to manage all of the screens and such. So we need to keep this in mind while respecting security needs. Thank you, Mr. Villeneuve. We're now going to the third round of questions. I would ask colleagues to be mindful of time, and this will help us conclude the full third round. Not the full third round, rather. We will have one member from each party who will have an opportunity to ask questions. First, Mr. Dalton for 5 minutes. Thank you. Tell me if I'm understanding correctly. In person, or rather in the past, an interpreter could be on the mic for 6 hours, and that changed during COVID to 4 hours, and now the new direction would be headed towards 6 hours again. Mr. Chair, a great question. So during the pandemic, the working conditions, well, for interpreters, I think that they were here and all other parliamentarians were elsewhere. So there was sound over the phone, all sorts of different sound. There were injuries. The sound quality was very poor. And my predecessors decreased the number of daily hours, and that is understandable. There are sound limiters in the consoles and in the booths, but in Canada, it's a very unique situation. I'm speaking to you today, and I don't have the earpieces on, and that is a loudspeaker. When a loudspeaker comes into contact with a microphone, it can cause a feedback loop, and that can cause injuries and is of great importance to us. We are really looking into how exactly that happens. So the change in the number of hours, yes, it's because all committees had the same question. So during 2024 and 2025, the Department of the Labor Program looked into the injuries and handed down instructions, and we worked together with our partners. And this pertains to hybrid interpretation. So the reduction in hours pertains to hybrid interpreting. We could be able to increase hours to 6 hours. Here in this meeting, for example, there is no one intervening online. So in this case, an interpreter could work for 6 hours. At other parliamentary committees, witnesses appear virtually.
Ça change maintenant. Il y a des changements qui arrivent.
So there are changes that come hand in hand with improvements and such. So what we're hearing is that the number of hours at the mic was changed from 4 hours to 6 hours. We are hearing that not only would that cause problems, but that interpreters would not work. We have heard that you would lose interpreters. Can you speak to that? So regarding freelance interpreters and staff interpreters, the sound quality goes into their ears, which is their working tool. So we want to make sure that in the booth, we're looking at all aspects of health and safety. We need to make sure that it is safe to do that work. We're hearing also that there would be a change in quality, a change in the qualifications for freelancers. They mightn't be paid based on their credentials. Can you speak to that? I will ask Annie to answer regarding quality. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. At present in the contract, the way that resources are assigned is based on the expertise, etc., is not taken into account for assigning freelancers. I'm proud to have employees who have different backgrounds. So anecdotally, we are aware of their expertise, but it is not a criterion. If there were a committee study, in that case, we would seek out freelancers to be able to assign them. But de facto, that is invisible to us. Interpreters are reputed to be of a certain quality, and we assign them as such. When we choose them, it is at random. The price is not, or their rate is not currently a factor. And we presume that they have the expertise needed, and we assign them. Just 15 seconds remaining. Mr. Godin. I think we'll have to go very quickly. Before the pandemic, it was 6 hours. Today, it's 4 hours. Is it realistic with the improvement in technology to return potentially to 6 hours, excluding committees where witnesses are present, like in the past? Or is that too utopic? No, There are countries who calculate the number of minutes that virtual speakers intervene, and that is how they manage their capacity. So that is a very good question. That would necessitate certain systems, and we're working on that with the House of Commons. Thank you, Mr. Godin. Mr. Dalton. Now over to Ms. Chenette for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all of that insight. I would like to come back to the topic of preparation, because we've heard that preparation would no longer be paid. So is that the case? And secondly, in preparation, is there really a difference today between those who are experienced and those who use tools to research the nuances of a given sector before going to work? And how is that preparation recognized, thirdly, because it is important to quality? Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. For the time being, freelancers assigned to Parliament have their assignments, as the prior witnesses mentioned, between 6 and 8 p.m. the night before, and then they must prepare. So regarding expertise in different committees, our employees work together with the freelancers to help them to get up to date when needed. They do have general knowledge of Parliament. When it comes to preparation, I think that everyone who submits a freelance offer to us includes that in their rate. There is no specific time specified for preparation. Now, when it comes to conferences such as the G7 or any conference, in G7, we gave 1 day of preparation during which there were documents for the interpreters to read, etc., and that was remunerated, but that was required because it wasn't known in advance what would be discussed. Sometimes information is known quite far in advance. So if I'm understanding, preparation is not paid for in advance. It is part of the rate charged. That is how everyone factors in their experience or their preparation time. So knowing that, what are the tools that will be available in the future to help our interpreters optimize their preparation time? Mr. Chair, I can answer. Regarding the tools, that is a very good question. I have seen all sorts. There are tools that can process the text for you almost in real time. So an interpreter can have an earpiece. And we know that translation is progressing in leaps and bounds. There are tools that help carry out research on a given topic. But it's like a question period. Sometimes there are improvised questions and answers. To answer your question, are there tools, voice-based tools? Because this is an area that is advancing quickly. Intonation, humor are all aspects. And there are now sports matches that are commentated by AI. When it comes to trust in interpretation, it is a fascinating topic, all of these tools that could become available to increase the quality and efficiency. As someone who does not master another language, how can we, in Canada, where both of our languages are important, how can we ensure that we don't decrease the quality of interpretation while using these tools? What is it important for the government to do? Very good question. Trust. Once again, I assure you that the Translation Bureau is using its expertise to develop tools for French and English in Canada to attract trust. In the public service, there are a lot of meetings that happen either in French or in English. So if I have a colleague who might need some of these tools, they could use them to help them follow the meeting, because interpretation might not be available there as it is here. You are familiar with Zoom. We use a different tool, but such tools are rapidly evolving. And you can use, for example, a subtitling tool. And there's even a tool that I could use to assess the quality of my French in the testimony today. And there are colleagues who will be able to check the level of their French if they're learning. And these are tools that we're seeing. We often see that people are most comfortable speaking in their mother tongue. And we work with our partners in science to develop tools in French because we know that scientific texts are mainly in English, but it is important for us to increase the French side so that people can really express themselves in the language of their choice. Over to Monsieur Beaulieu for 2.5 minutes. Thank you. So quickly, earlier you were talking about how you carry out assessments on quality of interpretation. Internally, do you do this so that you can see the evolution of quality over time? Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Reports are produced by the Assistant Director of Interpretation, who refers to them, and when needed, we make adjustments to training and mentoring that might be needed in the teams. Regarding hybrid parliament, can you comment on the quality of interpretation? Yes. So in hybrid parliament, it was mainly a question of health and safety. Some committees asked if the speed of speech or the density or the content was an issue for interpreters, and I answered that it was health and safety that was the predominant concern. I think that we are providing much more stable conditions now. I have heard of a study ordered by the Translation Bureau with University of Ottawa that shows the correlation between injuries and hybrid parliament. Can you speak to that? Yes, that's a great question. So there are sound limiters, and we know that those exist on construction sites, etc. But what about in an interpretation booth? What happens if a phone rings? What is the impact? Those tools are hard to come by, so we worked with the University of Ottawa and monitored the auditory health of interpreters. I won't get into the details now, but this is a study that pertains to measuring the dose of sound exposure. So we are working on creating that data that does not yet exist. There are concerns because in new contracts for freelance interpreters, there is not as much mention of health and safety provisions. Very, very quickly. Is there a reason for that? What I can tell you is that all measures that have been put in place to ensure interpreters' auditory health and safety applies just as much to our freelancers as to our staffers. It applies to everyone, and the standards are included in the contract, and the standards are here to stay. All interpreters benefit from the results and recommendations of the reports that we undertake. We did not feel the need to describe this aspect, but it is part of our agreement and our commitment, and we will never go back on that. Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I wish to thank our witnesses, Mr. Limburner, Ms. Plouffe, and Ms. Lévesque. Thank you very much. Our next meeting will take place on Thursday, October 9th. It will focus on minority language education continuum. And is it the committee's pleasure to adjourn the meeting? Adjourned.